We're back, man. The Tom and D podcast. We are back. Do I look different
Different than what?
than I did last time you saw me?
I don't pay attention to you that
See,
much.
I this is the first time I've had a goatee literally since they were hip, like back in the 90s. And
Okay.
I shaved my little beard thing down, and I said, now I look kind of like a professor. And since I am going to be teaching at
You
Indiana,
don't look like a professor.
yeah,
Not any professor that I've ever had.
and with my gray beard and my my silver glasses, I think it's kind of a cool look. I'm
Maybe
bringing
if you
the
had a jacket on and patches on the elbows.
with the patches on the elbow.
Right.
But then, of course, if you're going to be in Indiana, with all those hippie professors, you've got to wear your Birkenstocks with your wool socks.
Tom and D.
Two middle-aged idiots.
Okay, just for the listeners, Tom and I both went to Indiana.
We
Grad
did.
and undergrad for me, undergrad for Tom. That's where we first met. We've been lifelong friends ever since. So,
And I'm moving back there.
I know. It's crazy. When do you think that's going to happen?
Soon as my house sells, that's
right.
that's the only thing that's holding everything up. But I was doing some Bloomington reminiscing, and that summer that we started really hanging out, I don't know if you remember this, we both had motorcycles.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And we just had a blast. Now I would not ride a motorcycle today. I mean, with people on their cell phones, not paying attention. But back then, it's like, the best place to have a motorcycle, college campus, see some girl, you want to ride back to your dorm or whatever.
I know. That was back in the days, too, where you didn't always wear a helmet.
Right. Didn't always wear a helmet.
Now I see those guys without the helmets, and I call them donor cycles.
Hot donor cycles.
Right. It's just a matter of time.
Do you remember we used to get our bikes serviced at this place called Cascades or something?
Yeah, Cascades, right.
And
Cascades.
it was kind of off the beaten path. I remember going down this road with trees on each side, and if you blinked, you missed it because you had to turn behind.
Yeah, right.
This place, I mean, these guys were great and they didn't charge much. But the highlight of those visits, I
remember.
You know where this is going.
Yeah, I do.
You would pull in with your motorcycle and say, "What do you need?" And you're like, "Oh, I need my spark plug, whatever." And they'd say, "Oh, just park it over there. Go into the fridge and grab a Hamm's." So they literally had this refrigerator filled with Hamm's beer. I mean, there had to be like 6 cases at once in there. So you'd pop open your Hamm's and you'd be drinking.
Cans everywhere, empty cans.
Everywhere.
Right.
Now, you and I had this idea because the Jerky Boys, we love prank phone calls and stuff. So we actually called them up, and I said that I was with Hamm's Brewing, and I said, we've done a lot of research, and apparently you have consumed more Hamm's beer than any other customer in the United States. And do you remember what his answer was?
I'm not surprised. We drink a ton of it.
We drink a ton of it.
Right.
And we had this idea because, I was in the media school, so cameras and stuff, and we never did it. I'm really bummed we didn't, but we were going to go out there and to pretend like we were shooting him, give him an award or something.
The giant check,
A big, we drink a ton of it was going to be like the, the tagline or whatever.
Oh man, that's awesome. That would be fun to do. Well, with that, somewhere that segues into our next guest. You don't know who it is, but this is a guy that I worked with a long time ago. We've done a lot of different movies and TV shows together. And I actually wrote an intro. Our guest today is a man who's written more plot twists and directed more stars than you can count. From heart-melting holiday hits for Disney to wrangling the live chaos of the Miss Universe pageant, this man has done it all. If it's on screen and makes you smile, cheer, or even tear up a little, this man probably had something to do with it. Ladies and gentlemen, the brilliant multi-hyphenate Gregory Poppen.
Yay! Hey!
Holy shit.
There he is.
I can't live up to that intro.
Yeah, you can. You better.
Better make up some stuff really quick.
Dude, that voice. I'm a voice actor, man. You've got a voice. Maybe you missed your calling, but I guess not.
I think so. Well, there's still hyphenates to add, I guess. So
yeah.
So Greg truly has done it all. And I can't tell you, man, this guy, he's just as funny in person as he is with his writing. He's just a blast to be on set with and in production meetings. You've made me laugh so many times, even when you're trying to be serious. Yes.
It becomes a problem when I'm trying to get people to take me seriously. Oh, that's a good one. No, I'm being that's even better.
I was trying to think back on what the first movie or maybe it would have had to have been a movie.
I was trying to do the same thing.
I know we did like Boys Will Be Boys.
I think that was the first one.
Because that was the first one on your resume.
Yeah.
I'm looking right now at it right there. I scroll down to the bottom, and that seems to be the oldest one. So I must have. So you've known him his whole career, then, dude?
Yeah,
right,
no.
yeah.
And that movie, in and of itself, was a weird thing. So I was writing all these spec scripts. It was like mid to late 90s when like the spec script market was huge. Like nobodies would sell a script for like, for $500,000. Most of them never even got made, but it was like this window where it was a big deal. And this small company called Crystal Sky, this was back when there was still Blockbuster. So everything was, so you had what they called the sell-through market. So the direct-to-video market was a huge market. And this company was making these family films based on public domain stuff, which is Hans Christian Andersen and Mark Twain, was all public domain. And they were loosely based on those. So they called me in, and because I had written I was doing mostly romantic comedies. I'd written my first family film, and this production company called me in. I was very excited. They were based in Century City, which was funny. It was very close to where my day job was at the time. I literally it was in the same building.
What was your day job?
So my day job was I was working in a department that changed hands like 20 times. So I just graduated college, and I was from Cal State Northridge, so I'm a Valley guy. So it was Embassy Television, which was the old Avco
What the
Embassy.
fuck was that? What just happened? Did I just have a stroke? Am I hallucinating? Did that really just
that's
happen?
Not CGI.
Was that a bird that
I'm at my girlfriend's house, and she has a bird. So the bird,
and the bird is just a free range, just has control of the house.
Oh yeah, he's in charge of things.
Does it knock into windows and
So they hire me to write this script that they've already got the story for, and I write it. And I get paid. I never hear from them again. But I'm just excited that I got paid to write. It's the first time I got paid to write. So I'm super excited. I never hear from them again. And the title was Boys Will Be Boys. And my ex-wife at the time calls me, and she's watching a daytime talk show. And she says, and this is really dating myself, if you even know who Charles Nelson Riley is, you're old.
Sure.
Yeah, we're old.
So long story short, they're shooting the movie, never told me about it. And it's shooting in the Valley very close by. So I called my agent at the time, and I'm like, would you get off
there's the bird again.
Oh, he looked into the camera. It was
there's the bird again. Little scene stealer.
He's a scene stealing whore.
He wants you to cast him.
I know. So I call my agent, and they go, yeah, they're shooting it. And Dom DeLuise is directing it. And Mickey Rooney's in it. And he's on set right now. And so I drive to the set. So like the last 2 days, and I'm stoked. So I wrote this scene where these boys, it's basically, I kind of wrote a Home Alone type thing. And these boys took the lawnmower and they added eyes to it and all these things. And the lawnmower goes crazy. And I drive up and I park and I see this lawnmower. Would you get out of the...
That's hilarious.
That's awesome.
Well, I was worried I wouldn't be funny, so
exactly. You've got your sidekick now, making sure.
So I drove up, and here's this lawnmower that once existed in my head, this idea I had that I wrote, and someone like went out and built it exactly as I described. So they end up making the movie. So I don't hear from them again for months and months. And I get a call out of nowhere, and they say, can you come into the office? And I come in, they say, the movie is completely unreleasable. So Dom DeLuise was the director, and he was just directing, hey, this is funny, let's shoot this. Hey, this is funny, let's shoot this. And it made no sense. So in 5 days, I wrote a new script of wraparounds, and I had the kids be arrested. The way I fixed the problem is I had the kids be arrested, and they were telling their story of what happened, literally as a way to force in to fill in the blanks.
Right, sure.
And that's where, and I think that's where we met, because you did production design.
Exactly.
Yeah. And at that point, I was new being on set. I was so excited. And so I would talk to everybody, which if I could get advice, it's the best.
Right. Craft services, you're going up to them and saying,
literally. Yeah. It's literally, I talked to the generator operator for a half hour. Like, have you started up? Do you need gasoline? So
right. And now they're running Netflix, so you never know.
No, that's totally true, because you never know where anyone's going to end up. So, and I was amazed by Deren, because like he's got all his. Now, were you, if I remember, were you an architecture major, or were you?
Oh, kind of. I mean, I took some architecture classes, and then when I was an undergrad, and I wanted to be a writer and a director. And I didn't think I was talented enough to do that. I had some architecture background, so I started doing set design.
Yeah.
Then I ended up getting a master's in that while still doing writing and directing on the side.
Which is where he and I met in the theater department, because I was getting my minor in theater and drama, and my major was, media, telecommunications, TV, radio. So that's where our paths crossed.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah.
Anyway, back to Boys Will Be Boys and Dom. And
so I essentially fixed the movie.
Yeah.
And it also felt good. I said, well, this is why you probably should have called me while the movie was being made. I could have helped with this. So, and then from then on, I did this deal that was kind of like an old Hollywood deal. So the CEO of Crystal Sky is kind of like an old Hollywood type of guy.
Right.
And he said, and I was at my day job, which was TV syndication, which was fun. I was on the lot, but it was all the business side of the industry. It was making sure to ship the Who's the Boss reruns to the right TV station in Fayetteville. And that was my job. And I'm sitting at my desk, and he calls me, and we were negotiating another one of these low budget movies. And he said, well, how much do you make there? And I told him my salary. And he said, well, if we pay you that, will you just come over here and write everything? And they were churning out, you have to know, they were churning out a movie a year and developing a bunch more. And so I said, well, yeah. And for like a 5-year run, I was getting a movie made a year. Because they were low budget, they didn't want to hire. It's not like a studio movie where there's problems. Let's bring in 12 other writers. They can't afford that. So I was in, like Deren mentioned, I was in production meetings. I was in every step. And if we got a director who wasn't an actor's director, and a star wanted to work on the line, he said, you work with them. So I got to work with all the actors. I learned more about filmmaking during that 5-year period, where I got an astonishing 4 or 5 movies made. Then I went to film school, but I learned far more about the nuts and bolts of how a film is made. And when you write a scene, I knew now how much that scene cost. Like a lot of writers who don't know production will write scenes that they think are really cool. And they may think they're simple, and they don't know, well, that's cost prohibitive because that's the only scene at that location in the movie. So I learned to make multiple scenes happen at the same location so they could shoot them out. I learned way more about the nuts and bolts of filmmaking and learned how to weave that with the art of writing. So that way, and to this day, it's a great skill I have. If I know the budget I'm writing for, I can write to the budget, so it's organic. So it's not like you're dumbing down the story, like, oh, we couldn't get, Madison Square Garden, so let's make
You're just making it practical, so you can figure out how to do it. So do you think you got the most script revisions in those early days with that group?
Not really. That's another good thing. It prepared me so much for going forward, for not. because people would ask me that. They're like, oh, does it bother you when like an actor changes a line or a star changes a line? I think in a feature in general, you're just getting constant notes.
Yeah.
Why it's 92 different colors.
Yeah. Rainbow script. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But even when I eventually fell into doing a lot of television in the mid 2000s, so I went from all these features and then into like the live television arena. I started writing for the ESPY Awards, which was funny because I love sports and I love doing sports, but I'm not a stay-at-home on Sunday watch football guy. So I was a little worried that I didn't know it. So I kind of faked my way through it. So I had to learn. So it's writing for hosts, whereas the screenplay at the time, you don't know who's going to play the character. And then part of the rewrites is tailoring it to their style. I found it kind of nice to be on the ESPYs and they're like, oh, Sharon Stone's going to present this. So you could write directly to the artist's style.
You know who hated that? And it was Neil Simon, the playwright. If you changed one word in a Neil Simon play, he would just go nuts. From what I've heard, stories that have been told. I studied with Sanford Meisner, and he and Neil did a lot of work together and stuff. And that was always one of the stories through Meisner is that, read what's on the page. The writer put that there for a reason. And if he wanted to say it this way, he would have said it this way. But it sounds to me like, that isn't necessarily what always happens in Hollywood.
Well, if I can interject too, a lot of times in television, the writer kind of rules. You don't change dialogue, whereas film, the director does. So once the director gets a script in a movie, it can change all the time. The writer is kind of pushed aside in most cases.
Yeah, that's still very true. It's still in films, the director has the power. In TV, it's writer producers have the power. So usually whoever wrote the pilots, the first showrunner of the show, and the directors in TV are the ones for hire. They come in, you're directing this episode. You can't deviate from the visual look of all the other episodes. So yeah, it's really in reverse. And then what I was doing was a whole different thing. So I was doing TV specials, which is its own animal. So I ended up writing all the Disney holiday, all the Wonderful World of Disney holiday specials. So we would do one, we do a 2-hour special that aired after Thanksgiving in prime time. It was their annual Christmas Day special that airs on Christmas Day. That's mostly the parade. And there was a window where I was doing, so anything that had to do with the parks, I was writing. So they had a special on ABC, the opening of Toy Story Land. So I'd write. So they were always hosted by a pair of stars, always had musical guests, which was fun because you got to meet everybody. I even wrote, when they opened Shanghai Disneyland, I was the writer for the 3-hour live premiere of Shanghai Disneyland for television.
You're like, what is going on?
Oh, the entire time I was like this. So I wrote it in English. They translated it to Mandarin. So right away we were in trouble because everything in Mandarin takes longer to say.
Right.
So the script was instantly too long. And so we're doing, here's the weirdest table read I ever had. So we're doing a table read of the script. For those who don't know, it's when, and they do it in television, they do it in practically everything. So it's before you shoot, and you sit there with the stars and everyone else, and you read through the script. So we had 3 hosts, all of whom also spoke English. One of them was educated in the States, so he almost had an American accent in English. So we're doing the table read. We've got monitors of my script in English and the other script in Mandarin. And they're doing the table read, but at any given time, we're not sure if they're reading the script or if they're just talking amongst themselves.
Right.
Yeah, and it goes on for 2 hours. We have no idea what's going on. I'm sitting next to a Disney exec, and he turns to me. He's like, "Are you getting any of this?" I'm like, I just fell into this loop where I was writing everything Disney. And again, when you're writing for a host, it's a completely different style of writing. And I always feel like if I do my job right, people should say, "Oh, I didn't even know there was a writer on that." Like I should make it look like it's them having fun and bantering amongst themselves.
So
And
well
then,
said. Yeah.
yeah, and then those shows too. Disney, as we know, owns everything.
Yeah.
So
Not this podcast, buddy.
Yet.
it's
Yet.
coming. So they had all these. So ESPN wanted to mention, ABC wanted to mention, Disney Theatrical wanted to mention. So these specials were 2-hour commercials, and my job was to make it look like it wasn't a 2-hour commercial. So all these writing jobs have their own worlds and their own in and of themselves.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Because and Deren has too, but I've written a couple of screenplays. One of mine was about Cat Stevens, and it was called Wild World, the Cat Stevens story. And, I wrote this thing, and, it being a biopic, it's going to be a little longer. So it came in at about 185 pages. And then my friend, out in LA who had, gone to the, UCLA screenwriting and school and stuff like that. He goes like, they will never buy a screenplay that's that long for a first time writer. You got to bring it under 2 hours. It should be like, and I'm like, so I would take like the first 2 lines and the last 2 lines out of every scene. So it still made sense, but you get rid of the little intro fluff and the outro fluff. And boom, 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 boom. And I'm like, I've lost so much of it. It's like these scenes are so quick. I mean, do you find that like when you're writing a movie screenplay that you lose some of that having to, have it down a certain length? Or
you can just write in the slug line instead of describing everything for a fight scene, just put they fight.
Yeah.
It's just 1/8 of a page.
You're like, use your
they jam for
Right.
20 minutes. It's like, yeah.
Its structure is one of the hardest things when I was writing, and this is even after I'd sold a couple scripts. I still didn't have confidence that I knew what I was doing. Really early in my career, I think when I was 24, was my first big sale. I optioned a script at 20th Century Fox, which and I thought I was done. It's like, oh my God, this is going to get made. And I had optioned, and it was a script they rejected a year earlier. And a year later, they had a new head of production, and suddenly that was the type of thing they were looking for. So they optioned it. 6 months later, Keanu Reeves, but this is Keanu Reeves like mid-90s, so it's before Matrix. So he's a name, but he's not stratospheric. And they buy it, and then it doesn't end up getting made. A year later, I'm back at square one. But to answer your question, no. So I was, even after sales, I was really insecure about, do I really know what I'm doing with structure and plot? And it's such a, it's juggling chainsaws. And I really think there's almost no answer to it than just flat out experience of just doing it over and over. And you become so much a better screenwriter after things are made, whether they're good, bad, small, big. You just learn. There are scenes you write that in your head, you're like, oh my God, when this gets filmed, this thing's going to be amazing. And then you see actors do it, and it kind of falls flat. And then there'll be 2 lines that you thought were throwaways, but you see it being made. You're like, oh, that spoke volumes. So one thing I have now, because after COVID hit and every live show, I lost like 10 gigs overnight because they were all live shows. So I'm back in the scripted world, and I can now almost do a first and second draft simultaneously because I know I can cut in advance. But I really don't know if there's even a formula for that other than just doing it over and over and having, I was fortunate, like when Deren and I were working for that company and they were just cranking out films, that I was getting movies made annually as a writer. Every writer friend I knew was like horrifically jealous over that.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't a ton of money or anything like that, but I was getting stuff made.
Well, one thing I was going to say also is that I've heard the Coen brothers do this a lot, where it's kind of like, whether you're sitting in a restaurant and overhear a conversation, or whether it's a conversation that you have with your girlfriend, where you're like, this is really funny. Do you take little things like that and then put them away and say, now this will work for this movie, this scene that you kind of envisioned in your mind or saw happen in front of you somewhere?
I do. I actually do that all the time. When someone asks me, I get a lot of people asking me, writers who struggle with dialogue.
Right.
And I said, one of the best things in learning to write dialogue is being a listener. Like, stop being a writer for a second and be a listener. You can't be a writer, in my opinion. You cannot be a great writer without being a great listener.
Because people speak so differently than they do when different from sort of the technical writing. Like when you're writing a speech for a presentation, it's really different from the way that people go back and forth.
Oh yeah, it's night and day. And you think of yourself as a person. You speak differently to a wife, to a buddy, to your boss, to a cop when you're pulled over.
And that's why I'm divorced. Yikes.
Yeah, then you really speak differently.
Right.
I can speak to that. But I tell people, it's like, be a listener and be a creepy eavesdropper if you have to.
Oh, yeah.
And learn that when we're speaking with friends and we're speaking casually, we speak shorthand.
Yeah.
Sup, what's happening? Did you get back? We don't do subject, verb, predicate when we're casually speaking.
Right.
And it's listening to that in your head and really being a student of human interaction. And that, to me, that's the best way to learn dialogue.
Oh, that's great advice. Unbelievable. Yeah.
And now, Tom, now that you've taken this in, you're kind of a people watcher. You like to listen in, and I mean,
yeah, but I'm a peeping Tom.
But yeah, you watch people from behind like bushes normally.
Exactly.
But maybe you can do something with that now.
That's hilarious.
Oh my God, that's so funny. And you know, Tom and I, of course, we try to write a lot of things like a lot of people. The difference is Greg's work is critically acclaimed stuff that's used in film school. Ours might be cautionary tales. So don't go down this path. Don't do it. Leave the writing to the writers.
Well, I just love the way, and I've been fortunate enough to go into, doing live things. I've also done a lot of sports as a writer for X Games one year, which basically means you write the phrase, dude.
Yeah, I did that with you. Right. Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. We totally ran. Yeah, I remember that.
Oh my God, it was over the top.
Yeah, and you just write the phrase, dude, that was sick, like 8,000 times, and then you're kind of done for the day.
Oh my God, yeah, right.
And so I've written for a bunch of sports guys of ESPN, and the thing you learn quickly is they freaking love alliteration.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's got a bombastic backswing, that one, just like you learn to write. And to me, that's kind of fun, is seeing there. I was writing for an awards show. So Cartoon Network had this small window where they were trying to delve into live action. And so I did Hall of Game Awards, which was a kid's version of the ESPYs. And Tony Hawk was the host. And I remember... George Lopez was going to do Best Athlete. They flew him in. It was a big deal. He was just doing this one award. And everyone was going, oh, it doesn't matter what you write. He's going to change the whole thing. Doesn't matter what you write. And so what I did, it was at the time he had a talk show. He had a late night talk show. So before he showed up to set, I went online and I watched 4 of his monologues. And I figured out what his delivery style was, how he likes to deliver, how he likes to tell jokes. And so I wrote his thing in matched his delivery style. He came in after everyone telling me, don't even bother, he's going to change the whole thing. Came in, did word for word, and flew out.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's a mic drop moment. That is amazing.
Yeah. And it was, and I learned that on the ESPYs, and that because the ESPYs get a lot of the writers are a lot of, same with a lot of talk shows, a lot of stand-ups, a lot of comedy writers. And a lot of them just want to come up with a funny bit, and they're really funny. But that's why you get awkward moments at award shows. That they come up with a funny bit and they go, "Oh, let's get De Niro to do this." Well, De Niro's a brilliant actor, but he's not great on live. Don't force feed comedy in a people weren't funny, essentially.
Right.
And I kind of learned it became a game to like, oh, that's who's doing the delivery. I'm gonna make it the way they say it, and it makes it kind of fun.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's great advice. And it's like anything. A lot of people, whether it's a job interview you're going to, if you're going to a job interview, research the company, find out how they work. So when you go in there, you say, "Oh, well, I noticed that last year you guys did this, this, and this. Oh, this guy knows his shit." But something like that wasn't even, George Lopez had no idea that you went through and actually did your research.
Oh yeah, no, he just read it. He goes, "Oh yeah, this is the way I do it."
Yeah, this is perfect. Now you mentioned George Lopez. I know earlier Dom DeLuise and Mickey Rooney. Tell me some of the I don't know. Show off a little bit. Tell me 10 people that you've worked with that would blow our mind. I mean, Keanu Reeves is a huge name. I mean, tell me some of the people, and then also some of the favorite people that you worked with, and maybe the least favorite people. Well, you don't have to mention that. You're still
part of the fun of doing those kinds of shows, award shows or specials, is because you get famous athletes, so you do run into a lot of you get fun fanboy moments where I remember the last ESPYs I did, Samuel Jackson was the host. So I got to write for Samuel Jackson, which was blowing my mind to begin with. And I did the same thing.
Do you have a lot of motherfuckers in there? Just motherfucker.
We did this thing where we stole from the Oscars and we stuck them in for the opening. We inserted them in different.
I remember that.
And so we have done so much stuff. Because you fell into the same, with doing stuff with Neil and doing stuff, we were in this same expanded group. And
I remember that where they show some Chariots of Fire. Then Deren, you were one of the runners?
Yeah, but it was initially someone else. And Neil was like, "You kind of look like that guy." And I was like, "Can I swap places with him?" So that poor guy, I feel so bad to this moment because he's probably
you stole it from him.
That guy stole the scene from me. He's probably crying to his mom. It didn't happen after all.
Everyone watch the ESPYs. Watch the ESPYs. Never mind.
So, what's funny about the ESPYs, so Sam hosted the first one I did and the very last one I did. So the first one I did, the only reason I was called in was because we were doing that pre-tape at the beginning. And they said, well, we want a writer that's written features because they're supposed to look like feature clips. So I met the head writer of the show, and I went up to him afterwards, Greg Jennings.
Yeah.
I went up to Greg and I said, "Look, I've never written for television for a live show. Can I be, I even offered to do it for free. I said, can I stay on with the writers just to see what it's like? And he said, yeah. So I ended up being a writer for the special itself. Never worked on live television before. And I had no deal. They ended up giving me a couple thousand after for doing it. But I went in literally doing it for free. And I got material in his monologue and stuff like that. And then from then on, I was like a writer of the show. And that's how I got into television. And I think, again, as far as experience for advice for people is, I see so many things where it's like, well, check the deal. If you're not getting paid, don't show up. I go, no, that's not. Hey, it's the nature of the beast. It's a dues paying industry, and it always will be.
Always.
And so many businesses are like that, and just don't expect to get if I had gone
and show up every day like you got to prove yourself all over again.
Oh yeah, no, it's
I love that you said. Literally, I'll do it for free. I just kind of want to be a shadow and just kind of watch this. And then you end up writing the show there on out because a lot of the stuff that you learned, right?
No,
there.
Exactly.
And you got paid a couple grand on top of it at the end. All said and done.
Yeah. And it was great.
Really cool.
So Samuel Jackson there's nothing I can't tell you the feeling of sitting off camera and watching Samuel Jackson say words you wrote.
Wow.
It's so mind-boggling. That's a huge one. Oh no! Also in the ESPYs, we did with Billy Bob Thornton was doing this intro that I wrote, and we were live, and it's 5 minutes and he's still not there, and everyone on
Oh no, right.
on walk is like, where's Billy Bob? Does anyone have eyes on him? And then so someone says, oh, I think his limo's pulling up. So on live shows, you have this area called pre-read, which is a mini teleprompter, and the presenters will come in and read their part right before they go on. They've got a teleprompter when they go on, but it's to rehearse. And so we're like 2 minutes out. So there's a long hallway towards where they drop them off, and door opens and Billy Bob walks in. He's wearing like jeans and kind of a Western button-down shirt. He's carrying a half-empty 12-pack of Bud bottles. And he just walks down with those. And we were all, I was with one of the other writers, and we're like, if you want to meet Billy Bob Thornton, this is what, he is that guy. Right. So he strolls up, everyone's freaking out. So he walks up to the monitor, he reads his line, like, nails it instantly, goes on stage, nails it, comes back and goes, yeah, it was fun. Thanks, guys. Grabs his 12-pack and walks back to his
That's hilarious.
Like, that's a pro. And again, read it word for word, but I even looked back. There's been several times where I've looked back at the script to make sure that's what I wrote. And because some of these actors brings their ability is so beyond anything I can comprehend, where I like, I did write that.
And that's a great thing about the written word, because, you're writing something and you have this intent about, how it's being read, and then somebody else takes something from it, right, and they can add some subtext to it, or even just a little half beat somewhere, or some weird inflection, and it totally takes on a different meaning.
Yeah. Oh, no, it's amazing that they can do that. And then you have the sports guys when they're interviewing someone. So they've got the production truck in their ear, and they have the ability to interview someone while someone's yelling, okay, ask them about this, ask them about that. So they're listening in their ear while they're talking, while they're responding. And I look at that guy, I don't know how these guys do it.
Okay, great. I know we're running out of time, but I just want to quickly get into a whole new area that we haven't even talked about. And that's two of the things that are very hard to work with: babies and animals. Those are the two taboo things that are like, oh no. And Greg, man, you have done that many times.
Yeah. So I had directed some smaller TV stuff. So I got a chance made a deal to direct this movie that I'd written the script for, called Chili Christmas. So yes, you're told never to direct children or animals. So on my feature directorial debut, I decided to do both. But like the animal, luckily, so again, like learning from every gig you do. This whole thing is school. Like every gig you get, if you're smart, you learn something from it. So I had written a movie that Bob Clark directed, called Karate Dog. So we had tons of dogs on set. So I would talk to the dog trainers, and I actually learned what went in the training for certain stunts. Like one of the dogs, we did a spoof of the first Mission Impossible, where we hung a dog who was trying to hack into a computer. And I was talking to the trainer and said that was a 3-month training job to get the dog comfortable with hanging. So I learned which tricks are easy and which tricks look hard but are easy to, and vice versa. So I literally wrote the screenplay around what I knew I could execute with a smaller budget with a dog.
Lots of give me a paw.
Exactly. And then I would still get surprised. I had written this scene where the dog's left home alone and gets into trouble. And the way I had written it is the dog accidentally steps on the TV remote, and the TV turns on, and the dog starts imitating this commercial. And that was in the script. So the trainer's on set. She goes, he can pick up the remote and aim it at the TV, which I had no idea. I go, yeah, that's way better than what I wrote. And then all you have to do is add a sound effect of the click.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's all, but it ended up being a great experience. I work well with kids anyway. I have a grown daughter, and I'd coached before. So directing the kids, where a lot of people have problems with it, they're all around 12, 11, 12, 13. There were 3 of them. And that was no problem for me because I related to kids really well and I actually enjoyed that part. But the animals, it's like, it's a crazy.
Baby geniuses, things like that, you know,
Yeah.
when you're doing with a baby.
Well, and Bratty Dog, I remember the early days because it took a while, you know, to get that movie off the ground. And, and I remember there was a lot of, you know, starts and stops. And we had, wasn't a set in San Francisco and ended up filming it in Vancouver?
Yeah, it took place in San Francisco. Yeah.
And that was during a big strike, as I recall. And maybe that was Baby Genius first, why we did that up there. And then Karate Dog followed.
Yeah, we kind of did those back to back.
Back to back, right.
Yeah, we were in Vancouver for a long time.
Yeah. But I remember originally, wasn't it called Chojo?
Yeah, so the original, I wish that my original title was Unleashed.
Oh, yeah, Unleashed. That's right.
Which I wish they used.
Oh, yeah, Unleashed. That's right.
Yeah, the dog's name was Chocho, and then they changed the Karate Dog. And the best part was, so talking about stars I've worked with. So Pat Morita was in it. It was literally the last movie he did. And
wow.
And so his hotel room was right across from mine. And Pat Morita loved being in the bar. And so his wife was with him. So I remember one time I get back to my room, and there's a knock on my door, and it's Pat Morita in his underwear.
Oh, God, the visual.
Pat Morita. I grew up with Karate Kid and Happy Days.
Right.
And so he's like, he had a question about a scene. So we're working through this scene in my hotel room with Pat Morita in his underwear.
Boxers or briefs?
Greatest moment I've ever had. No, it was brief.
Oh, Jesus. Oh,
and so one
awful.
time we were in the hotel bar, and it was just people nonstop coming up to him, Mr. Miyagi. And so he's telling everyone in the bar that I'm his son. And then everyone starts talking to me, what was he like at home? So I start making stuff up about my childhood with Pat.
Wasn't John Voight also in that?
Yeah.
Right.
And John's a sweetheart. It was a wild shoot. Well, when I come back next time, I'll tell you I have tons of wild stories. I was head writer on Miss Universe for 4 specials.
Right.
I was the one where he said the wrong name.
Oh, really? Oh, my God. That's awesome.
That's a story. That's an episode in and of itself. To this day, the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me on set on a show or movie.
And can you just sum that up for our listeners really fast, like a nugget there, like what it was?
Yeah, there was little like on social media, they faked. It was not faked. It was like the whole, and it all came from, luckily it's not the writer's fault. So it's the only part of the show that's not on prompter because there's a whole studio audience there. So if they put on prompter, everyone knows. So the script department types up the cards. And he just read it wrong. And it's a 3-hour show. 3-hour live shows are extremely hard because it's all about making time. So a commercial break comes, producers yell at you, and you're backstage as a writer, and they're like, oh, we're 4 minutes over. You have to rewrite this scene. So you have the commercial break to do a rewrite. And you don't have time to physically write it out. So you go over to the teleprompter guy. You have to think of what you're writing and dictate it to him. And he enters it directly in the Meanwhile, they're like, you've got 30 seconds. And so once you pass the last commercial, we're like, oh, thank God, we can relax. And so I was relaxing. I'll just tell you my part, and I'll do the rest later. But so I'm relaxing, and one of the executive producers comes in and goes, "Oh, we tabulated votes. You want to know who won?" And he goes, "Philippines." I'm like, "Oh, great." And so when he announces Colombia won, my first thought was, "Oh, I probably misunderstood what the EP said." And nothing happens for like 15 seconds. She's walking around with the crown, and then suddenly it's the Titanic. All hell breaks loose backstage. So the production truck knew immediately. We didn't know backstage right away. And And meanwhile, the girl's walking around like, and so Fox wants to cut to a commercial, which would have been a disaster because then everyone would have been,
Left.
oh, it's fixed.
Like, what happened? Yeah.
Yeah. And so the stage manager on his own whispers to Steve Harvey, and they want to cut commercial. So Steve Harvey, completely on his own, goes, hold up. I made a mistake. And we're just freaking out backstage. And then meanwhile, we're over time. Like it goes to 11, and then that's when local news starts on all the network stations. So we're over time. And so she has to take the crown off and put it on the other.
Poor thing.
Oh, and it got weirder from there. And this is back in a time now with everything going on, there's bigger things going on. But at that moment, it was the biggest news story in the world for 24 hours.
Right.
International. And it was really surreal.
There's the bird.
You're not part of this.
Greg, thank you so much again. Really, really appreciate it. You are awesome.
Thanks so much, guys. It was
so nice to meet
man.
you.
Love you, man. Talk to you soon. Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.
Wow. He is cool, man.
What did you think, man?
Literally, we could have gone for another hour. I mean, I was just mesmerized listening to his stories, and you can tell the thing that I like not best about him, but is the fact that he says he's learned something from everything that he's done, and it's like, I don't care if it was, I love the story about him saying that all I want to do is just be a shadow on the wall. You don't even have to pay me, knowing that he would learn about writing live television, and look what happened. He ended up, or being the main writer for that show, and just, a wealth of knowledge, and someone who still probably takes as much time doing something and invests as much into it as he did the first thing he ever did.
He's a great writer. He's so talented, and he's just so genuine.
You can tell.
He's just learning constantly.
Exactly.
Tom, that was great. Thank you, my friend. And, we'll talk soon.
All right.
All right, man.
Later, dude.
Bye. Tom and Dee.
Two middle-aged idiots